Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final video on values and my amazing co-host, Reverend John, and I'm Reverend Bobby, the Senior Minister Spiritual Director here at the new Pacific Coast Center for Spiritual Living. And John?
Awesome. What a wonderful, auspicious start to a new energy and a new community. It's really exciting. And we know that underneath it all is what is driving it is driven by vision and supported by values. So that's why we've been talking about values, because it's so critical to decision making, to every component of our community.
It is. And what do we know? How do we know what we want to create if we don't look at the very thing that we all sort of anchor to, which is our collective and individual values? Why am I doing this? Why am I here in this community? Why am I in this movement? And what it is, what do I want to be part of? And so John and I are going to do a little recap on all that's happened over the last 2 years. We'll add a little piece to what wasn't presented in the town hall meeting. But we've been working on this for almost 2 full years. And
well, when did we first meet, Bobby?
January of 2022. John's become my best friend because of this kind of deep work.
Just
and
amazing,
it all has values.
Just amazing synchronicity and timing and all of that. We've said over and over, it's been divine right timing.
Absolutely. And so John and I started meeting in January of 2022. We were coming out of the phase of the pandemic that was, how are we going to do this? How are we going to, I think we were in a recovery mode from all that had transpired at Seal Beach and then running through COVID over here at Namaste and our own transition that started right before COVID. And John and I started to have these conversations about really values without calling it that. And what opportunities existed for us to work together instead of compete against one another.
Which has been a traditional way that centers have operated for years and years is, oh, we're too close to that community. They're taking our people from classes or Sunday service. And it was a tired argument.
It was. And we've seen people move from Namaste to Seal Beach to Namaste. And there's just been a host of those kinds of things going on. So John and I were talking about what are the opportunities, and to where we said, what if we got together? What if we asked these two leadership teams, hey, why don't we get together and see what the opportunities were? So we started meeting in June of 2022 at the Christ Lutheran Church in Long Beach. And both boards, leadership teams came together. We brought some practitioners and some community members together to start talking about what we were dealing with. And it started with what's not working in our movement, what's not working as far as the model that we operate
in. And it wasn't just CSL communities or our community. It's really been a trend throughout spiritual communities that was in place before the pandemic. And the pandemic just really exasperated the whole thing.
So we looked at data points with respect to churches. What was the trend of the decline, and where was that trend happening? And it was happening in pretty much every faith tradition out there. And ours was a little bit different because we sort of fall in that sort of, we don't have a salvation model. You don't have to come to church for a reward. The reward is in itself of participating in spiritual community and growing in our knowing of what it is that contributes to a healthy whole life, right? And so we also looked at the fact that the minister-centric model was exhausting ministers, and the burnout rate was just rising exponentially. And what model could we look at? And so we started to talk about a minister-centric model or a mission-centric model.
And I think, we don't have that salvation reward that we can focus on. And so part of this is discovering, well, what do we have to focus on? And it really comes down to that mission. So what are the components that make for a vibrant mission. You know, it's not just something that has fancy words and you put it up on the wall and nobody remembers it on the Sunday or knows what it is at all. It's much deeper than that. And so we had to really discover what are the roots that are really part of a mission vitality in a center. And so we're still working on that, but what we looked at are, what do we have in common in terms of values?
So we, at the end of the year, which happened in November of 2022, we decided and created a combined Adventures in Faith. So Adventures in Faith being a book study or some kind of study. And so we created cross groups from both communities, and we had an upwards of 70 to 80 people participating in our Adventures in Faith in homes and at the different communities, and discovered and talked about diversity and what it means to be diverse in our spiritual community and how can we open up to be more inclusive. And the Adventures in Faith was an interesting, challenging, and a really eye-opening experience to the fact that we could really work together and that we have more commonality, which came down to the boards decided to present to the community in January of 2023 to vote on really being intentional and focused on collaboration as two communities, up to and including potentially a merger, a unification of the two communities, instead of trying to do this on our own, just on our own exclusively in the communities.
You know, and what informed a lot of those decisions is we had set up a template that we would revisit for every meeting that was driven out of the values that we had established. And you may recall, we had started a lot of that values discussion by reviewing the rabbi's gift, where the old monastery was in dire straits and they turned it around. And the way they turned it around is the rabbi asked or said that one of you is the Messiah. And as the monks discussed that, they found out that they had an extraordinary respect for one another. Mm-hmm. And that's what started that whole values-driven piece, is how can we mirror that aspect of having extraordinary respect for each other. And so that was part of the template that was created. And we also recognized that in any change, we use the example of the caterpillar that goes into a chrysalis. And in that place, all of the previous structure dissolved. And the caterpillar was a conscious or collaborative component of that change. Unlike the caterpillar, we can resist it and try and put those DNA pieces back together. Right. But we resisted that because we established that this was the way forward, to let something new emerge. And that's where the template was created for us moving forward and having these collaborative discussions and coming to the consensus that we could offer that to the community to decide to unify.
So beginning in January, there were teams that were broken up into varying programmatic areas that we operate as spiritual communities. And each one of those teams was given the activity to identify what each person's individual values were and what they felt that values should be for their program. So if it was spiritual support or administrative and operations or facilities, that each one of those teams was invited to select values that they were going to evaluate and or produce recommendations going forward, whether or not we should unify, as well as what should we do with those particular programs. And the values that came forward that rose to the top for the entire process was extraordinary respect, compassion, accountability, and safety. And both communities embraced those as what to hold it all up to, what lens to look at everything through. How do we want to treat one another? And those four values were the four that rose to the top.
And what also rose to the top was to look at, do we have the competency and experience that we are expressing those values already? And the answer to that was, well, there's plenty of room for improvement.
Right. And so what came out of that was, let's decide, how do we want to prepare the community? Because a vote eventually came, which was in April of 2023. There were no impediments in the way, and the communities felt that it was appropriate to come forward and unify as two communities that came together. And it was close to unanimous. It was very little dissent with respect to that we should do this. And so we came together with a unified service in July of this year. And also what came forward were two things that we needed two skill sets that we needed to improve on to learn how to come back together again. In some cases, learn to come together in a very powerful way. The 4 agreements was identified as something we should bring to the community to teach people again, well, how do we come together in a way that's healthy? And mindfulness being, how do we come together in spiritual practice that allows us to pay attention to, what am I doing? How am I showing up? What is the prevailing thought that I'm having? And when something comes up that's troubling, how do I deal with it? So those 2 classes have been brought forward as sort of, these are the basic skill sets for any member of our community, and definitely baseline for any leader.
And what that's created is, a culture that has those values of mindfulness and the 4 agreements as a baseline to start understanding what I have to do personally to get more engaged in this community.
What also came out of all that was a basic vision that can apply for quite a while for us, where this vision came of what we're doing here as we come together as a community, to explore using these values and to know that, and to have a place to land with respect to what that vision could hold us as we walk through this process. So this vision came forward. We read it every Sunday as we go forward in looking at what this community has aspired to do. And I'm actually going to pull up that vision, which is that through mindful and respectful exploration, we are creating a healthier foundation that supports and engages a whole beloved community equipped to launch new strategies for a thriving spiritual center.
Very powerful statement.
Absolutely.
That you all created through this team effort. And it becomes a filter for looking at hospicing the old ways of how we were doing things and midwifing the new birth, what wants to be born as an engaged community, the beloved community, we call it.
Right. And every program that we have, we're looking at. We looked and created a whole new welcome team program, which practices both the care model as well as does it in the context of those values. We're looking at fellowship. How can fellowship be supported? And how can we create something that includes community commitment in that? We just presented the youth and family program, and how do we want to look at that? Where do we want to start? And what's the basic need? And then all culminating through this process of community-driven process of what the name could be. The community identified the name, walked through a process of visioning for the name, selected the name as all that was rising to the top with respect coming from the values of extraordinary respect, compassion, accountability, and safety. And that name was chosen on Sunday.
It's so exciting to see that this has emerged, that a new community has emerged out of these shared values, and using those values to filter decisions about what is this new community going to be called and where is it going.
Now we get to go at what's next. And so a few things that were presented on Sunday with respect to why do people come into our center and how can we be that place and space for people to grow and to evolve. People come into communities because of friendship. These are some of the deepest friendships that I have made has been in spiritual community. They come in for spiritual practice. John, I want to throw one to you, which is next, which is outreach. Why is outreach so important?
Well, the outreach is, we think of it always in terms of outside of the community, but the outreach too is within our own community. And to recognize that we each play a critical role in the safety and the extraordinary respect and the compassion and the accountability with each other. And it's got to be driven by each other rather than relying on the board of trustees or the ministers or the practitioners to drive it. It's got to be the responsibility of each and every person.
When someone walks into our doors, they want to know that what's being built is a stable and healthy congregation, but in every way, financially, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. We know that that's the framework for what we have to build, so that as people walk in that door, not only we're in a place to support them, but they feel that they walk in, that they're going to develop and align with tools that we teach so that they can be supported in their own lives.
And that's a great point, is that this isn't something that you have to know how to do. This is something that is being developed, that we are growing and developing together to see what the felt needs are. What are the needs of this community that we as a community can address? And it's really a very different model of, rather than relying on the minister to cast all this wisdom before the community, that the community is going to decide, to be able to articulate, well, I don't know how to be this for somebody else. Well, this is where the programs and classes are being developed to help each and every person to feel confident in their ability to do that outreach. And as the community grows in that capacity, the outreach into the community outside of the sanctuary is more possible to achieve.
One of the other pieces to this is the fact that as a spiritual community, that we know that we have to be adaptable and flexible with times. We have to look at where we've had bias in the past and can grow beyond that. We have to know that we're adaptable in what we present and how we grow, and the elements that they continue to evolve, and that honestly, the good old days didn't serve everyone. And so how can we be more of service to the community? Not only those that walk in those doors, those that are already there, but those that will walk in those doors, that they can walk in and go, I can belong here, not just and for what I bring, but also the fact that when I look around the room, that the people in this room have open arms to who I am.
It's really an exciting opportunity that's before this new community, and I've been honored to be a part of it, and especially proud to know Reverend Bobby and to be able to say that this community is in excellent hands.
Thank you, John. What John reminds me all the time is whatever's next is we are creating a cooperative. We are creating a community that is embracing commitment, that it isn't just left to the two ministers or the minister or the board or whoever that is. So the invitation from this video is, what are you committed to in this community? What is the possibility for commitment? Because commitment is how we're going to build this. And anything in the way of that commitment is in the way of what we create.
There it is, right there.
There it is.
What can this community count on in terms of your participation?
So we're excited. We're excited to have both been part of this together and with you, and we're excited about what happens. John is going to be have a place in this community as we go forward, whether it's a teacher, visiting and speaking. He's certainly become part of my life because this was a life-changing experience, and I'm so grateful to get to do that with you, John. Thank you for being my companion on this journey, and appreciate what you do.
I've deepened my spiritual growth in uncounted ways, and part of it is simply getting to know each and every person and opening my heart to the gifts that you all have given me. So thank you.
Thank you. And Pacific Coast Center for Spiritual Living, I am so excited to even say that name. It gives me goosebumps, and I'm so glad we get to see what's next. So thanks for being with us here today.
Be well.